you have some big goals for yourself. And so I wanted to have a few different conversations around many of the popular topics that people are trying to reach as they are starting the new year. When I met Dan and Kay Ockey and heard their story of overcoming $20,000 of debt, newly married while in college, and what that has led to today, I knew they were the perfect couple to have on the podcast to share about creating a financial system that works for you and your family. So they talk about their own story of getting out of debt, the emotions that played a role into that. Kay didn't know when she and Dan were getting married the extent of the debt that she was now entering into. And so what that looks like in their marriage, and now what they do to help other couples reach their own goals. So I am so excited to invite Dan and Kay Ockey on the podcast today. Welcome to the Connection Codes podcast. This is the podcast where we break open the emotions that take us from being disconnected to connected in your relationship and in yourselves. I am your host, Tera, and today I have Dan and Kay Ockey, the founders of Centsei, joining me as we discuss finances in relationships. I am so excited that y'all are here today, Dan and Kay. What a gift. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, we're really excited. This is such a fun topic and a different take than some of the other podcasts that we've been able to be on. So I'm excited for it.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I got to meet Dan through a mutual friend here pretty recently, and you were sharing with me a little bit about y'all's journey and how you became the founders of your company, which is Centsei, and how you created this platform to help couples connect over their finances and reach their financial goals. So can you tell me a little bit about y'all? Bring our listeners into your story and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, it all started when we got married and realized we knew nothing about money and nobody had told us anything. And so I came from a background of wanting to be a successful entrepreneur. I was running a digital marketing company that looked good on the outside, but was crumbling on the inside, mostly due to my not being able to handle financials. And at that time I was dating Kay, and we got engaged and got married. And the truth really didn't come out about my situation until we were married. And that, as you can imagine, opened up a beautiful can of worms we got to enjoy together.
Yes. And so through that journey, kind of being thrown into the fire, we learned by trial and error how to not fight about money, how to communicate about money better, how to develop what we now call the financial growth system, but essentially how to work on finances together and do all these things that take a lot of that shame and guilt and fighting and all of that out of it and make it a lot more of a joyous experience. So anyway, that's what we discovered and then created. And through that experience, then shared a blog article telling about our journey of paying off 20 grand of debt in 6 months as college students. And then we got a response from that. We were never necessarily starting out trying to make a business out of it. We just were doing it for ourselves. And then through that response, we were like, wow, okay, maybe people do want to learn about this. So we started teaching people in our living room, and that expanded to online classes, to now we have 16 coaches, and we meet with couples one-on-one and teach them the financial growth system. So been a great journey.
And there was 7 years between that point and this point. So it's been a big journey for us. Like Kay said, it's never something we really intended. We've kind of just followed one foot after the other and been able to now see there's over 1,000 households that have been through our program. And so we've just seen a lot of budgets. We've seen a lot of situations. This is what we're focused on, is how do we take households, marriages, couples, and help them make progress financially to experience real peace and not have money be a stressor in their lives. We have enough things to stress about. If we can remove money and make it a strength, that is a huge win. So that's a brief summary. We're happy to dive into any of that, but that's kind of how we got to where we are now.
Yeah. And so, Dan, I am curious because this information did not come out until after you were married. Was it something that you knew that you didn't want to share? Like, what was happening for you in that?
Yeah. The picture I had painted was that I was killing it. was that I was very well off, that I was successful. And luckily, Kay didn't marry me just for money. Otherwise, she would have already left me. But the main thing, I think, is that I didn't really know how to talk about it. And it just kind of felt like something we were going to deal with later, which kind of probably painted my opinion about money, was that this was a problem that we could just push off to the future. And I didn't need to confront it now, and we would deal with it later. But there was no plan. There was no reality. I wasn't living in reality. I was living in that someday we're all going to figure this out. And that turns out that's not a good idea. That's not going to work. That was my mentality. And I was very embarrassed. In fact, had Kay started, we got married. She's like, all right, we're married. Let's talk about our money. Let's do a budget. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And if she hadn't have started asking direct questions, it may have even taken even longer for everything, because I wasn't going to divulge that myself.
Right, right. Well, I think it's important to hear, like you said, you were embarrassed. And so that's a feeling of shame, and how much we hide from each other from that feeling of shame. And you're not alone. Like, so many of us, we talk about it a lot on the podcast about how we all have either coping mechanisms or behaviors that we do that shame really is. It's the thing that keeps us from sharing, but then it's also the thing that keeps us falling right back into that behavior. Like, the shame continues to fuel more and more of that. And so what did that conversation look like when you finally had it? Like, tell me about that. You're like, I don't want to go back there.
No, we're fine.
We can laugh about it now.
Yeah, not great. I'll just say that. I think we've definitely learned a lot since then. But technically it was when we were engaged.
It was like 3 weeks before we got
married. It was towards the end of the engagement. Yeah. And I think it was just kind of casually, I'm like, hey, like, I know that you had some debt. I'm like curious a little bit more about that. And Dan's like, yeah. Like, so can we talk about that more? And then I literally like whipped open my spreadsheet or whatever. And I'm like, all right, list them out. Let's get this out on paper. And I think that was the first time Dan even realized that he was in 20 grand of debt, because it was just something looming in the background that, like, okay, yeah, I know I have some credit card debt. I know I have some, like, a car loan. I have some student loans, but it was all just kind of like there. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, getting it all on paper. And then I don't know, maybe you can speak to this. Like, what was your reaction when you saw the, like, 20 grand of debt on paper?
I didn't know I was in that much debt. And the truth was, it was even worse than that, because I was living off of credit cards by paying off other credit cards. And that part didn't come out, I think, until.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't realize, oh my gosh, I've accumulated 20 grand of debt. And this wasn't all just, I know people come out of college with a lot more debt than 20 grand. But this wasn't just student loan. This was behavior debt. And I'm doing a great job on being on my own, already starting to accumulate and showing behaviors that, if these continue to compound, will become a huge problem. And that was also the case, is that I started to realize that, okay, what I'm doing isn't working, but I still had the mentality and belief that someday our companies are going to make enough money and I'm not going to have to worry about it. And I was deceiving myself. It was a wake-up call, but I still wasn't going to change.
And I think that was probably the hardest part of that conversation, wasn't the number even. Like, okay, we can do that. We can, like, tackle anything. Even if this was 100 grand of debt, I believe in us. We can do it. It was more the fact that there wasn't really any desire to change. And I felt like I was maybe pushing for something that Dan wasn't on board for. He's like, we're doing fine. I'm like, what? Are we seeing the same thing? Like, I don't want to live on credit cards for my whole life. So let's figure this out. So that, I think, was probably what made it a hard topic that continually came up, because I would bring up, okay, we said we were going to live on this budget. And Dan's like, well, yeah, whatever. And then, hey, we said we were going to pay off debt. Let's do this. So there were multiple conversations until that, like, change of heart came. And then it was like, all right, we're now on the same page. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, you became a team in that moment. And I think it's interesting because we often get married And so similar to how you're described, we think we know everything about this person. I remember when Wes and I were engaged, I thought, I know everything about him. We are just alike. They say you married the opposite, but no, we have all the same interests. We're so similar. And then we got married, and I could not have married someone more opposite from me. Like, we are complete opposites in so many ways. And so I think that that part of the story is not uncommon, to have someone and you get married and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know fill in the blank about you. And for you, it was finances. For other couples, it could be something different. But navigating that shift where you had the expectation, now the expectation has changed, and you're learning to work with this new version of what you had envisioned. And that can create a lot of stickiness. It can create a lot of tension. And was that something that when it clicked for Dan, after that, you felt like you were on the same page, or were there still those trigger moments? Did you still have these moments that come up? You're like, ooh, this is bringing back that past damage or that past pain that we had.
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely made other mistakes after it clicked.
And me too. Not
Yeah.
that I'm perfect. Yeah.
One of which was emptying our life savings and putting it into a stock that I didn't tell Kay about. That was a great decision that I had to fix. But, you know, the moment that clicked for me, and this is something that we see, because a lot of times we have people come to us where one of the couples like, I really want to get our finances in order, but my spouse could not care less. And it's really hard, because the truth is, until you both commit, the change, like, you can do things that will help, but you won't get to where you actually want to get to unless you both do it together. What happened for me, it was a specific moment, is we had a really tough argument. Again, this is months, we're newly married, we are fighting about money constantly. And I, slam the door, walk out, and go, and I'm like, the heck? Like, we're married, we love each other. Like, why is this so hard? And I had the thought that maybe it's me. And I realized, I had the specific thought. I thought, is my marriage worth my current money beliefs? And
say that one more time.
Is my marriage worth my current money beliefs? And the answer was no for me. And it was in that moment where Kay calls me and she's like, all right, you can come back now. I come back to the house and I say, okay, I'm willing to change. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start, but I'm willing to do something. That is what kicked the journey off. And honestly, that was one of the best things that ever happened. And I'm not saying, look at me, but I kind of shudder to think where we would be had we not made the decision to do it together. And there were several other decisions after that, of course. But that was, for me, when I decided to stop fighting and to say, I want to be a team. I want to do this together. You matter more to me than whatever I believe.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful, because I think that is a part of the equation a lot of people miss. We get so busy pointing and looking at what the other person is doing or the mistakes that they've made, that when we don't pause and be like, ooh, where am I missing? Maybe I need to contribute something different. Maybe I need to show up differently. And that's actually where things can change. There's so much power in that. And when both people can do that, that is when a transformation can take place for sure. And so that's incredibly powerful that you had that moment and you didn't ignore that voice and you took action immediately to experience where you're at today. So tell me, what was that first step then? What did that look like? You made the decision, and then what happened next?
Went on a road trip.
Where all good things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went on a road trip to a friend's wedding. And while we were
paid for it with credit cards.
Probably, yeah. And while we were there, we were talking to some of the more experienced couples, I guess, like our friends' parents and people like that. And one couple in particular that were pretty successful, we asked them, how did you figure this out? And we were vulnerable enough to say, we're stuck with money right now. So we need some help. And how did you figure this out? And they gave us some great starting points and even were some resources, some audiobooks. So our very first audiobook that we started with was a Dave Ramsey audiobook that we downloaded and listened to on the car ride home.
I was very against Dave Ramsey, but I was at the point where I was willing to listen to anyone about anything at this point.
Yes. And I think that definitely helped get conversations started. And that's what I think is the most critical point of whatever like third party resource you listen to or whatever is obviously you still need to use critical thinking skills and not just follow blindly, but getting those conversations started in something that's not just my way, your way. It's like, how do we create our way? And it's helpful to get some outside inputs and have those conversations without it turning into a like explosion every time. So I feel like during that road trip was when we made our very first plan. We wrote it down on a napkin as we were driving home of what we were going to do. And really from that point on, we like decided we're going to make the sacrifices. So we're like deciding if we should stop at Chick-fil-A, and we're like, we'll just drive home a little longer and make PB&J when we get home. And we're like, we were really trying to make sure that we stayed committed from that moment on. And I think that definitely helped speed up the process so that we could rip off the Band-Aid, get that thing done with, and move on to other financial goals and other financial resources. And then we just kept learning literally everything we could get our hands on. So I think that helped those conversations keep coming up because we were listening to Robert Kiyosaki and we were listening to Ramit Sethi and we were looking at financial blogs and we were doing all these different things, all these different philosophies and creating our plan based off of this like buffet of financial literacy. So yeah, it's good.
I love that so much. I love that your first step was being vulnerable and asking someone else for advice. That is truly such a powerful first step that we often miss because of shame. You could have gone to the wedding and pretended like you had it all together and been the cute newlywed couple there, but you decided to be vulnerable instead and ask people that were a little further along than you and actually take their advice and take action. I will say though, I have been personally victimized by a road trip listening to Dave Ramsey. Like, Wes and I for sure did a Dave Ramsey road trip driving back from Oregon one time. And it was the most miserable road trip we've ever taken. It was also my first time ever away from my daughter. And I was like, just so ready to be home with her. And that can be really rough. And so how did you navigate those conversations? And now you did that work. What's that transformation had in your relationship? What has been the effect of those decisions?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fair enough. Be careful. Listen to Dave Ramsey on a road trip at your own peril.
Flip a coin. What's it going to be?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think, well, the impact of what that had, and I think this is something that a lot of people miss when they're considering getting out of debt, is the intangibles that put into our relationship. So it really bonded us together because we became a team to then tackle this problem. And so it taught us how to communicate. It taught us how to work together. We took on early morning custodial jobs. We started to go cleaning buildings. And in that time, we would listen to books for like 4 hours while scrubbing toilets. So we were just getting this education while we're paying off our debt together. And then we would talk about all these ideas. And so it just really catapulted things forward. It took us 6 months while we were still in college to pay everything off. 3 months after that, we had a 6-month emergency fund. Then we started maxing out our Roth IRAs. Then we've been able to get a house. And like, we've just been able to do this without debt. We have 3 children now. And I'm not saying look at us, but what happened is paying off the debt and getting on the same page financially unlocked us. It allowed us to move forward as a team in ways we never would have been able to otherwise. And we have opportunities and are doing things that we never would have been able to otherwise. And we see this with clients. When they get on the same page and they take that step forward, it's almost like the chains come off, their debt goes away, and they're free to do things they didn't even know that they could do. I think for us, had we not done that, I mean, we talk about that all the time, that decision and that time period, we wouldn't trade it. We would do it again because of how valuable it's been for us and continues to be. It actually gets sweeter every single year because we can see the compound effect of that.
And what I'm also hearing is, which you've said the word team quite a few times, it doesn't sound like at any point Kay was like, nope, you have to figure this out. You got us into this mess. You're going to go take these extra jobs and you're going to wake up early. And it feels like you really chose partnership. And that's something that we talk about a lot, is like the power of partnership and working towards that goal together. So how much impact do you feel like that made? Kay's support. How much did that catapult you forward?
Oh my gosh, we wouldn't be here without it. I mean, we need each other. We're stronger together than we would be alone. And it wasn't easy. Kay had to make to her credit, she made the decision to accept my choices and then do something about it. She assumed my debt and treated it as if it was her own. And that, I mean, you don't get enough credit for that.
And I don't know. I think that is something I didn't really consider at the time. That was what you do. We're not going to sit here arguing over who did what, just make it happen. But I think after coaching other couples, I realized how that can be a bigger challenge to overcome. I think some things that helped with that were Dan's attitude. I think if he had stayed in the I don't want to change, I just want to keep doing this forever, I think I would have a hard time. I would feel like I'm doing it by myself. Now I'm the one trying to pay off the debt, and I'm the one trying to live within our means, and I'm the one trying to do all this stuff. But because he made that shift, it was just a natural thing in my mind that okay, if you're on board, let's rip this Band-Aid off. Let's get this done. Yeah.
And it sounds to me that I think that Dan's attitude probably could have been so positive because you were a partner, because you weren't shaming him and creating more turmoil for him. It's both of your attitudes just fed off of each other. And whenever one person can really shift and be no, we're going to do this, I believe in us, and have that positive outlook, and the other person can meet them there, and you're feeding off of that energy with each other, that's where amazing things happen. But when we're nope, you made this bed, you lay in it, you're going to figure it out, that person's going to keep laying in that bed. The change is so much harder. And so I just want to commend both of you for that, but also, Kay, the power of being the partner and stepping in and saying no, we're in this together, and I see you, and I'm going to support you, and I'll wake up early. I think that when we can do that for our partner, that's where major transformation happens. And there will be a time, and you may have already experienced it, where Dan is doing that for you. We take turns. And so if I can't meet Wes when he's down, then how can I expect him to meet me when I'm the one that's struggling? And so it really is this a true partnership. So tell me, going now into running your business, how do you help people get unstuck? What are some of the first steps that you encourage people to take, especially we're going into the new year and so many people are setting their resolutions and what we want our goals for the year? And so what would you say that people could do to really get started in this journey?
Well, along that goal, I think starting with the end in mind. I think that is something that is huge. And that's where we start when they first come in, is painting the vision, thinking about these steps. Where do you want to be and how does that look? And when you get aligned in that vision, it's so much easier. And it doesn't feel like you're just managing money and oh, I should pay off debt because that's what they say you're supposed to do. And it's no, I want this because XYZ, and you're working towards something bigger. That's our whole premise, is goal-based budgeting, for figuring out how that all goes together. And so that's what I would say, start that goal, and then making the plan of how to do it is definitely critical, because you can't just have an empty goal. So starting with the goal. The other thing that we do is talking to our clients about the emotional side of money, kind of like we're talking about here, going through your past, how you were raised with money, because a lot of those things, all that shame, all of those things come right to the surface. And you can self-sabotage, right, very quickly with going after those goals. If you just focus on the spreadsheet and the numbers, that's a very, very small piece of money. Most things that we do don't make logical sense. It's usually an emotional response to something. So getting that handled is another step for sure.
Being aware of that. Yeah, for sure. Everything Kay said is spot on. I think there's two things. And the truth is, I see a lot of individual people in the partnership come to us and they're I want to do this. My spouse will not go with me. And that has to be the first step, because yes, we can put some things in place. We can have you set up a budget. We can start tracking, but then your spouse is going to go spend $1,000 without you knowing, and it's just going to ruin everything. And so we've become more and more convinced over time that if you and your spouse are not ready, if your spouse isn't willing to walk the money walk with you, that's the first place that needs to start. Well, how do you fix that? And the truth is, it's a lot of prayer and a lot of patience, because you can't change them. They have to come to that decision on their own. Like Kay did for me, that often comes from continual love and support, and not shaming, not accusing, not blaming, but being focused on the problem, not the person, and doing whatever that takes. whatever they're willing to do, taking that step. Are they willing to listen to a podcast? Are they willing to read a book? Are they willing to talk to a therapist? And respecting that and letting them come and letting them know where you stand, saying, this is what I want to do. I want to walk this road with you, but I'm willing to wait until you're ready. If that's your situation, it is hard. It is a long road, but it is worth the wait, and continue to love and pray for your spouse until they come to that point.
And I also think along those lines, the awareness, because oftentimes we've seen where like one person manages the money in the relationship. And in our opinion, managing money is not like doing the dishes. Like it's not something you could just say, all right, you do that and I do this and we're good, because it's so intertwined in so many ways. And so even just if you started with, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to look at our expenses. And if you don't track or don't have a budget or whatever, even just let's look at the credit card bills. Let's write our debt down, like somehow seeing that together, like what I did with Dan of listing it all out. I think that helps the problem be separate, like Dan was saying, where it's not you. It has nothing to do with you. It's not me. This is the problem. What do we want out of life? Is this the trajectory we want to be on? Okay, let's change that. That I think helps them, because sometimes if you're the one only managing the money, whether it's the woman or the man in the relationship, still they may not even know. They're just living on autopilot, buying things. This is what we need. This is what I want. And they don't even realize what that ripple effect is causing.
Yeah, we've been talking about the autopilot quite a bit here recently on the podcast. And we get stuck in this like zone of just doing the same thing every single day. And breaking out of that, the awareness is the first step. That is a really great point of just being aware, and then also knowing that end goal that can help move you forward. And one thing that I have recognized with emotion, we just had Sharon McMahon on the podcast, and she talked about how fear is a great human motivator. Like it will motivate us to take action pretty quickly, but also core level anger. Core level anger is our driver. When we can step into that anger and be like, no, I am not going to live like this. This is not what I am going to do. That can help drive us into the change that we need to make. When we get angry enough about our finances, we'll change. When we get angry enough about our marriage, we'll get help. But it takes us tapping into those emotions to move to action. Shame is not going to move us into action. Shame keeps us stuck many times. If we can't access it and process it, we're just living way down in it. And so I think tapping into those emotions is really powerful, that you do that with your clients as you're going through, for sure.
Yeah, sounds like we need to do it even more after you bring up great points like that. I think you're spot on. And to that point of stepping into the anger, I think Kay did that, but the anger wasn't directed at me. It was directed at the problem.
Well, and anger is not behavior. So we often confuse anger with the behavior of like, I'm yelling or something like that. Anger it's an emotion. And what it does, it just says power up. You need to act, like move forward. So tapping into that, it can still drive you even if you're very soft. And I think about Enneagram 8s, like really healthy Enneagram 8s. They say Mother Teresa was an Enneagram 8. She was out there feeding babies from a place of anger. Anger drove her because she was angry that people were starving. And this soft, tender woman probably had more anger inside of her than we can ever imagine, because she was acting every single day. And so I think a lot about healthy, which if you're into the Enneagram, healthy Enneagram 8s that are like powered up and ready to take action. They're the humanitarians of the world. And anger is my favorite emotion. I love it so much, but not the behavior. So yes, I think that's a great point. But yeah, getting angry about the problem and partnering together through that, I think is really powerful. So tell me, before we go into the core emotion wheel, like what all you do with your clients and some of the transformations that you have seen people go through.
This is why we do what we do. I'm sure it's similar for you as when you see the transformations. I think the main thing that we're trying to do is develop a checklist where if you and your spouse are ready, we have dialed in every step that you need to take to implement the right tools and the right systems to actually make progress. And then we keep you accountable to it. Our program is a 24-month program. It's not a quick fix. It's a long-term game. But over the course of that time, we've seen couples pay off over 100 grand of debt in a year. We've seen marriages repair because once they get the finances figured out, it kind of bleeds into other things. So they figured out how to communicate. And we're not therapists and we're not trying to be. But basically, when a couple takes a step forward together towards a clear goal that they both agree on, we have built a checklist and a process where a coach will guide you through step by step, hold your hand through the process till you get there. And that's setting up the budget. We give you the software to track it all. We help you automate and set up all your bank accounts the right way. We help you know what to focus on. We help you figure out how to save for everything. Every I gets dotted and T gets crossed when it comes to the day-to-day finances. This is not an investing program. This is how do we manage money so that we have a surplus that we can invest. And then once we've done everything we can, we pass you off to the people who can help you invest. So that's what I would say is what we do on a deep level is we help you implement a system and keep you accountable to it. And we've gotten good at it. And so that's what we do.
Yeah, and Dan kind of said it a little bit, but the financial progress and before and afters are easiest to track. It's easiest to see. And we have a list of how long of those of people who have bought houses and been able to go from 2 incomes to 1 income or loss of income. And how do you navigate that? Or all the different financial challenges that you could face. But the part that's most rewarding to us is almost like their aura is different. When you talk to them at the beginning and you talk to them later, that I used to hate talking about money. I was like, push it under the rug. This was so overwhelming to me, to it becoming so exciting, it becoming hopeful and encouraging, and that team and all of those things that you can feel when you're talking to them. And that's definitely our favorite part that extra motivates us for sure.
I love that because ultimately at the end of the day, you're helping people eliminate pain. And so often we don't recognize even what our pain source is if we've been in it long enough. You've grown numb to the pain, but the pain that you're also helping them eliminate adds into shame. It adds in the guilt. It adds in all of these other really more sticky emotions, the more painful emotions. And you are giving them a tool to get out of that and find more joy without the money being tied to the joy. Those quick hits of, I'm going to buy this cute purse. This is a quick hit of joy, but I'm going to feel pain later when I'm looking at my bank account. And so you're helping them find more lasting joy. And so I would love if you would participate and we always ask everyone to do the core emotion wheel on our podcast. And this is the 4-minute tool that our founders, Dr. Glenn and Phyllis, created that actually helps you get underneath to the root cause of what's even driving our behaviors. It really helps us to uncover and communicate with our partners what we're experiencing. So instead of us pointing the finger and being like, you did this, be like, ooh, I'm feeling really lonely in our finances right now versus being accusatory or defensive. And so would you mind doing the core emotion wheel with us?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And so how you do it is you both are going to share a recent time or a big time that you felt each emotion. And the other person, your job, we call it the ooh, but it is holding safe space for that person. And it's a nonverbal but verbal response. So it's just like okay, I hear you. I see you. It's just holding that space. Who's ready to go first?
I'm starting. So do you pick one and then I do it, or do you?
You start. You don't have to go in any order. You can just say them as they come up.
Okay. The last time I felt shame, I made a mistake with one of our team members and I needed to fix it. And I made a mistake and had to correct it. And I felt some shame about that. Same guilt that I made that mistake. Joy, when our 16-month-old woke up happy this morning. She made us all have a great morning this morning because she woke up and got enough sleep, and she's just a delight. We make a chocolate protein shake every morning, and she has learned, this is on me, not Kay, but she has learned the sound of when the chocolate chips hit the bottom of the blender, and she'll come running to go get hot chocolate chips. So that brings me joy. Anger. I'm an Enneagram 3, so I don't know if I'm driven by anger the same way as Mother Teresa, and I'm not comparing myself to her. But I do feel anger for our clients' situations. Not them at them, but just, man, like there's so many people out there who just don't know what the next step is or where to go. And then sometimes there's those spouses that aren't willing to change. And I feel anger at those situations and not those people pretty much on a daily basis. Hurt. Same situation with this personnel person. They said some things that hurt me, but drove me to want to make things right. Fear. I haven't felt, I have to think. Lonely. I do feel some loneliness sometimes in the realm of entrepreneurship. That's why it's great to connect with people like you, Tera. Not everyone understands the struggles, and of course, me and Kay are here, but sometimes it would be nice for us to talk to more people about challenges or things we're going through. Sad. I am sad on certain people's financial situations, clients who've made decisions that we're working with them that are not going to end well. One of those for me recently is a client putting some things on credit that they know they shouldn't, like a new TV and couch and stuff, that they're ignoring the principles we've taught in favor of short-term pleasure, which we want them to have those things. We just want them to have them the right way. Fear for me, I think the weight of what we've built is a source of fear for me in some ways. That the company's bigger than we ever expected it. It's already past what we ever anticipated. Doing this full time, I feel a lot of responsibility personally about all of our clients' success, all of our coaches, all of our team, our family. And I think there is fear that I won't be able to do it, that I'll hurt people, and that often gets solved when I see the good that comes from what we're doing. That comes up. So that's my feelings. Did I do it right?
Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you for sharing. I think it's incredibly powerful. I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen and they relate so much. It's like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one that misses with a teammate, or I'm not the only one that experiences fear about what I've built. It really is very connecting. Thank you for sharing that, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay. I think most of my fear, this kind of blanket one, but I guess I felt it even this morning, is with time, feeling like time's going fast, and whether that's in a macro scale of like our kids are growing up or we want to reach these goals or whatever, usually self-inflicted, or if it's on a micro scale of like, we have this podcast and I need to get the babysitter taken care of and help these and I like 3 minutes to go or whatever. I think that's where a lot of my fear comes in. And then lonely, I would say kind of similar, especially like in entrepreneurship, and then that balance with motherhood. That's been like our entire company, because we started it when I was pregnant with our first baby, like officially started Centsei. And now she's 6.5. Well, no, she's exactly 6, but we started, I guess, when we were pregnant. So we've been running it for 6.5-ish years. So that space just seems fairly unique. And I haven't found a lot of people that do run a company together who prioritize and value similar things and do it. So it's great to connect with other people who value family and who also value contributing to the world in this way. So that's that. And then sadness. Let's see. I think like the last time I cried. That would probably help me, the action.
Something is missing. Sadness, the message that there's something missing or damaged.
Oh, that's helpful. Okay. I'd say like Dan and I, with our dynamic of who does what in business and navigating that, sometimes that can bring sadness of like, okay, where is my value and where's your value, especially as we're moving further into the business. Because before it was just like all hands on deck. And now we have team members that do a lot of the things. And it's like finding my place and making sure that we aren't stepping on each other's toes, but that we are working out as a team, but then also have clear roles. So I'd say that there can be some missing or damage there for sure.
I get that.
Hurt. Let's see. May have to come back to that one too. I don't know.
Sharp pain. The messages move away.
Those are actually really helpful. So thank you for your help. I think maybe with my son, not that it's not in a major way, he's only 4, but he definitely is a daddy's boy, major. And so finding ways to connect with him that work for him, that aren't just trying to find ways for me. I definitely feel that sometimes they're like, okay, leave me alone, mom. I just want to be with dad or whatever. So yeah, in a small way, that can be it too. And joy, I mean, this whole season brings so much joy. I feel like I have a huge surplus. But one small thing is we just upgraded our Christmas tree from a small one to an actual real, well, it's not real, it's still artificial, but
The one you've always.
yeah, like, and that has brought a lot of joy every time I see it, and getting ready for the Christmas season and all the memories that come with that, and all the gratitude that we just came off of Thanksgiving. That's been really brought a lot of joy. So I feel like I'm at a very joyful space.
I love that.
And then anger, thinking of that as like action. I think, like Dan said, it's a lot of understanding clients and where they're at. And there's also a lot of compassion paired with that, understanding that this is a really tough economy, tough time to make things work, and not everything was self-inflicted and all of that. But that action also combined with hope, because we know a lot of times what they don't know. We've seen this happen so many times. We've seen the end results. And so that anger is like, come on, you just got to try this. And I know if you stick with it, it will be so much better in the end. So that's a lot of anger. Shame.
What's your phrase for shame?
Yeah.
I am. So there's something with you. Yes.
Like a label that I feel ashamed about.
Yep. Yep. Can you think of a big time you felt shame?
I don't know. Maybe give me a couple examples if you're willing.
Yeah, you can also make one up. So that's another rule. If you can't think of a recent or a big, you can make something up. I feel shame when I yell at my kids or I don't have patience. I feel shame whenever I am late. If I don't get dressed in the morning and I have a call and I don't look my best, I have shame. So those are a couple of smaller examples. If I miss with Wes, I feel shame.
Yeah, I think I definitely feel shame with the yelling or something for sure with kids. Just feeling like, I guess a broader way is when I feel like I have an expectation for myself of how I can show up as a mom, as an entrepreneur, anything. And I like fall short of that, and learning to have more self-compassion and understanding that that happens to everyone and we can always repair. But that's definitely a shame point for me. And then guilt, what's your word for that?
Something you did.
Okay. So probably in the same vein as what I was saying before, just the guilt that comes when you don't measure up to that expectation that I was hoping to be.
Yeah. Thank you both. Thank you for sharing. It's so connecting and powerful to hear other people's experiences, and it really does help us relate to each other and realize so many of us experience such similar things on a daily basis. We feel so isolated and alone, like I'm the only one going through this. I'm the only one that has this fear or this shame. But so many of us are experiencing similar things. And to hear our stories, it helps us to be more human and to even process what we are also walking through. And so as you share, my brain connects with what you're saying. I'm like, oh yes, I get that. I've been there. And so I can feel that. And then when you share your joy, I'm like, oh man, even just this, like I can hear chocolate chips hitting the bottom of the shaker. And I'm like, joy, yes. How do I come and get some chocolate chips first thing in the morning? So thank you both. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for using your core level anger to drive your action, to figure out your story for yourself, for your family, but now helping hundreds of other people experience the same and go through this process, because we talk about trigger topics and knowing that sex and finances and family, like those are huge pain points in people's marriages. And so I have a lot of joy that I got to bring you on to tackle one of those topics as we roll into this new year for our listeners. And I hope that people that are listening feel inspired and feel hope that whatever their goal was for 2025 financially, that they can reach it. And if they need extra support, if they need a coach, how can people find you?
Yeah, absolutely. We're on all the social media platforms, but senseifinancial.com is where you'll get all our resources. And we have a free budgeting class that is the best place to start. And just watch that class. That's a great invitation to invite your spouse to watch with you. get the conversation going. And then if you'd like more info from there, you can also do a free consultation with one of our coaches. And so those two things are pretty much the best step, first step, if that's something that you're looking into to get your finances going. And even if you don't work with us, we'd encourage you to start the conversations, get things going. Having finances figured out is a huge blessing, and it allows you to focus on other things that are more important because you're not worried about the money.
That's amazing. Yeah, I would love to share the budgeting class with our audience as well. And so if you're on our newsletter, if you get our information, watch, because you have an invitation. We can send an invitation to the budgeting class. Okay, great. We'll send one out. And so I encourage our listeners to join in and listen to that class. I know this is a topic that Wes and I are currently working through. Our finances have changed dramatically over the last 2 years, and he is currently essentially back in school to become a pilot. And so we are constantly saying, okay, we've got to rework our budget, and he's going to take on less video work. And so what does this look like? So to our listeners, I'll be right in that class with you. You are not alone in that. We can figure this out. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for all that you do. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the budgeting class.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having us, Tera.
Yes, thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much to Dan and Kay. I absolutely loved hearing their story. There's so many parts of it that I know so many listeners will relate to. One on the financial standpoint of struggling through those conversations and needing to find that partnership with each other to reach your goals. And then also many of you may relate to the fact that, yeah, when I was getting married, I had to change my expectation. We had to learn a new way of communicating with each other because it wasn't exactly what I imagined it to be. You are not alone in that. If you are wanting to reach these goals in 2025, there's a link in the show notes to connect with Dan and Kay. And if this is your first time listening and you're like, well, I want the core emotion wheel. I want to learn how to process those emotions so I can communicate them in a way that's connecting. There's also a link in the show notes for the core emotion wheel. We are so thrilled that you're here and kicking off this new year with us. I love a new year. I know I've said this on the podcast. It's so much joy for me, but we are here to help support you in your goals. We do all of this because, as Dr. Glenn and Phyllis say, you need this, you deserve this, let's do this.